Roast chicken. It's a timeless classic and it's been on our dinner tables for generations. But how we've cooked has changed a lot. So today I'm going to show you two styles of roast chicken, ranging from the 1950s style that my nana used to make me, all the way through to a modern era roast chicken that's technique driven and comes from the world of restaurants and is absolutely delicious. And a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Squarespace. If you need a website for recipes, a blog, or you're starting a small business, they're the people to talk to. But let's get stuck into this roast chicken. So the roast chicken, actually in the 1950s, the birds were a lot smaller and they're actually quite a lot tougher too. So they'd cook them low and slow. The roast was an event. We tended to eat more beef and pork back then as well. So this is how my grandmother used to do it. You got a whole chicken here. I got some lard, which is just pork fat, but you can use butter, you could use tallow, you could use olive oil. All I'm gonna do to that is season it with salt. But make sure you get salt on all the legs. You know, don't just season your chicken like this from the top. You're gonna miss all this meat under here. We'll talk about brining when we do our modern chicken, but brining wasn't really a thing in the 50s in most households anyway. And we're also gonna season inside the cavity. The only other thing we're gonna do is cut this lemon in half. And I like to put a lemon in the cavity as well. And there we go. Now, you can truss your chicken as well. That's also a viable option. However, my grandmother never really did it. So what does trussing do? It brings the bird tighter, and it should cook a bit more evenly. It also presents a bit better. But we're gonna do it just how my nana did it, which would be just leave it au naturel. Au naturel. It's a weird thing to say, Andy. So then I've got some potatoes here. If you want something that's good for roasting, so you want like a floury potato, and you want to cut them into the similar size, roughly this size. So most modern chickens, you wouldn't even cook the potatoes with the chicken anymore, because potatoes will generally take longer than a chicken to cook. The chickens are so tender these days, you can roast a whole chicken like that in under an hour, realistically. But we're gonna do it the old school way, just like Nana did, all on one tray, and we'll see what temperature the chicken comes out at when the potatoes are cooked. So I'm gonna put these in a bowl, season them with salt, and then get more of that lard on them. Toss those so they're evenly covered, and away they go. Spread them out. Then I got some baby carrots here. This is a bit of a luxury. I don't think there was baby carrots in the 50s, to be honest, but you know, there's a bit of creative license. I'm gonna spread those around as well. I'll leave the tops on. There's nothing wrong with them, as long as you wash them well. And that's pretty much it. One last season for good luck. I'm gonna put this in a 180-degree oven. We'll start checking it after about an hour, but I reckon it's gonna take a bit longer than an hour with all those potatoes and everything kind of on that tray like it is. When I first started making videos, I just put the recipes in the comments. But a lot of you told me that when you're cooking, hands covered in chicken, flour, or whatever, it wasn't the easiest way to follow along. And that's when I realized having a website for all my recipes, game changer. And Squarespace makes it easy. With their new design intelligence, anyone can build a beautiful custom website in minutes. No design skills needed. It adapts to your needs. So whether it's for recipes, a food blog, or something bigger, your site looks great and works perfectly. Thinking you're starting a food business? Well, you're gonna need a name. Squarespace's business name generator gives you AI-powered suggestions in seconds. Then you can register the domain, build your site, and even design a logo all in one place. And what's the point of a great website if no one can find it? Squarespace has built-in SEO tools to make sure your site gets discovered fast. Meta descriptions, automatic sitemaps, all that good stuff. When someone Googles best roast chicken recipe, they actually find your site. So head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use my link squarespace.com/AndyCooks to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now let's get back to that roast. So for the modern one, we are going to spatchcock the chicken, which is actually a technique that was invented or used mainly for game birds when you're cooking them over an open flame. But it's pretty common now, especially doing roasts. I think it's actually a better way of cooking chicken. Cooks it faster, you can get more color on it, and it's really simple to do. So this is a chicken. Hello. This is the front side of the chicken. So you got your breasts and your legs and then your wings, and then this is the back. And this is the backbone here, which is what we're trying to remove. It's really simple. Get a good set of kitchen shears. We're gonna run them up either side of the backbone, and it's pretty common sense. You're gonna feel it and see where it is. The only thing I would say is there's one piece of meat on the chicken, which is my favorite piece of meat and most chefs' favorite piece of meat. It's called the oyster. And it's this muscle right here. For whatever reason, that little muscle is delicious. So make sure you go around that muscle. So start in the back of the cavity, run your shears up along that backbone next to the oyster, and then continue all the way up past the neck. And then you can see we've cut it in half, or just center of half. We're going to repeat on the other side. And then you've got a piece of chicken neck to use for stock or sauces or anything. I'm going to pull this open. Now, this is an optional step. I like to do it. There's a rib cage here. I like to pull that rib cage out. So if you want to run your blade underneath that rib cage, it's just easier to do it now as opposed to when you're trying to carve the bird later. Then just trim any of the excess kind of big deposits of hard fat at the bottom. Make sure there's no kind of weird bones hanging out in there. Flip it back the other way, and we're going to perform 1 round of CPR. So just put your hand on the top of the breast and just like push down firmly. Careful, it's slippery. And we're just trying to crack that backbone, which has done it. Usually it makes a bit more of an audible sound. There we go. That's our chicken spatchcocked. Whoa. So, brining. 2 ways to brine any meat, really. Wet brining or dry brining. I'll wash my hands. So wet brining is when we create a brine of water to salt in a ratio. We put the whole bird in there or piece of meat into there, and we leave it there overnight for a period of time. The salt penetrates the protein, firms up the protein, and also seasons it all the way through. Dry brining is when we take our piece of meat, we put it on a rack like this, and we season it just like we did with the 50s chicken, all over really well. And what happens is that the salt dissolves into water, and you'll see if you lift this out, you'll see all this salt kind of start to pool up into liquid, and then that water gets absorbed into the meat just like you would in a wet brine. The benefit of doing a dry brine is that we want to get crispy skin. So the enemy of crispy skin is moisture. So by doing a dry brine, we can just pat this dry instead of having to completely dry it out like we would in a wet brine. So this goes in the fridge for at least 6 to 8 hours, but preferably overnight. And then next up, we're going to start getting our potatoes ready. And instead of roast potatoes, we're going to do a potato parve. What is it? Well, it's a really delicious potato dish. It's also called a 1,000-layer potato. It's a great way to get super fluffy interior, crispy outside, and it's very kind of technique driven. It's also great because you can do it all ahead of time and you just fry it off to order. We're gonna take some nice floury potatoes, something that's good for making chips, like Morris Piper, russets, etc. I'm gonna slice them very thin on a mandolin, being very careful not to cut your fingers. You should probably use the guard, unlike I do, because I'm a hero. I'm gonna slice those into water and get any of the excess starch off them. Once they're all sliced, we're gonna take them out of the water and we're gonna dry them really well on clean tea towels. Then we're gonna put them back in a bowl with some chopped thyme, a big pinch of salt, and some clarified butter. We're gonna mix that through so that the butter's evenly coated all those potatoes, and then we start layering them up. So I've got a bread tin here that I've lined with parchment paper or cooking paper. I'm just gonna layer these potatoes up until they're completely full. So now the potato is nicely stacked up. We're just gonna fold our paper in. We're gonna cover this in foil, and we're gonna place it in an oven, 170 degrees. It's gonna take about 2 hours at that temperature, but what we're looking for is it to be completely fork tender. So our potato is hot, but it's been cooking for 2 hours, and it should be, you can see the steam coming off there, what I call fork tender, which means you have a skewer or anything, you push it in, there should be no resistance, and it just comes out cleanly. Leave that paper back on there. I've got another tin the same size. You're gonna put that on top and just weigh it down with whatever you got. So in here, we've got some brown sugar and some tomatoes. I'm gonna put that whole thing in the fridge once it gets to room temp, and we'll leave it there overnight just to set up before we cut it. So through the powers of YouTube, here's a spatchcock chicken that I have that's been in the fridge overnight. So you can see that the skin, the color is completely changed. There's a bunch of liquid that's fallen off into the bottom of the tray, and it just looks a lot drier. That's what we're after. However, we do want to hit it with some paper towel just to make sure we get any excess moisture. See, there's still a little bit of moisture there. Any excess moisture off. So while we're calling this a roast chicken, before someone jumps in the comments and goes, oh, you're frying it. We are. So I've got a heavy base oven dish here. If you don't have one of these, don't use like an aluminum one or like a thin metal one that won't hold the heat enough. Just use a big fry pan if you've got one of those. And I've got it over a medium-high heat. I'm gonna use some olive oil. Just gonna put a little bit on the chicken, all over. And I'm gonna put a little bit in the pan as well. Carefully put our chicken into our pan. You can see that oil smoking, that is what we want. Breast side down. And then we want to put a weight on the top of it. So if you don't have a protein press, you could use another fry pan or anything with a bit of weight, just to get as much skin as we can in contact with that hot pan. I'm gonna let that sit there and fry for 7 to 8 minutes. Then we're gonna put the whole thing just as it is into a 180-degree oven. We're gonna roast that until we have an internal temperature of 65 degrees in the thickest part. It'll carry over cooking, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So we've only got 3 things left to make for the modern roast chicken. I call these endive. My friend Sarah calls them whitloff. We'll agree that they both called the same thing. But this is a really nice, kind of quite bitter cabbage, but it kind of roasts up really nicely. We're gonna pan fry those. I'll show you that in a second. And we've got to get our potato pave ready. So I'll show you that first. We're just gonna carefully lift up the parchment paper, and then we're gonna turn it out. Just try and loosen it a bit. If it doesn't want to move, just get a palette knife down the side, or a knife you're not too worried about blunting. Sometimes they do just need a swift whack onto the board. Let's see if that'll work. That didn't work. She's stuck in there good. Sometimes it's just the air gap in there that can be a bit tricky. Once you kind of break that air seal, they should come out nicely. Look at that. Take all the paper off. We're just going to trim some of these sides here so that we can sit it flat. It smells good, it smells deluxe. Smell the butter and the herbs. And make sure you save all these little crispy bits, because those are the chef's bits. And then we're just going to cut these. So I think a piece like this is a good size. I mean, you can do them bigger than that, but I think that size is kind of nice. They're pretty rich, and we should get 6 pieces out of a loaf tin like that. Oh, calm down, Roger. There's a motorcycle shop right next to the studio. They're nice guys. And I need to be nice to them because my bike needs a service. So that's it for the pave for now. We'll fry those off in a second. The endive, we're just going to trim the bottom off very carefully. You don't want to take too much off, or the leaves will fall off when we slice them in half like that. I think half is enough as a portion. And then just like you do with our chicken, we're gonna dry brine them. Not really dry brine them, but kind of dry brine them. Season them with fine sea salt, and we'll just let that salt bring up any moisture. It'll also kind of dry out any of the bitterness. And then we'll pan fry those when we're almost ready to serve. But first, let's get some oil on to get these pave nice and crispy, and I'll show you how we can flash them to keep them hot later once our chicken's ready to go. So I've got my oil up to temperature here. We're sitting at about 160 degrees. That's kind of what we're looking for, 160, 170. If you're cooking, deep frying over a stove like I am here, turn your extraction on like I'm about to. Otherwise it's gonna stink. I'm using olive oil. You can use peanut oil, tallow, you can use whatever oil you want that kind of you like frying. I really like frying in olive oil. I am very aware that it's a pretty deluxe thing to fry in. I'm gonna carefully lower these in. And just make sure you move them around a bit. Let them kind of come up to temperature before you put another one in. You can put these in the oven if you want. They won't get as crispy and delicious and golden, but they'll be pretty close. But I do understand that people are often a bit like, no, can't really justify frying stuff all the time. It's a bit of a pain to clean up with the oil, and it's expensive. So we're gonna fry these, get good color on the outside, then we're gonna pull them out and rest them. We'll flash them through the oven just before we serve them, so they're nice and hot on the outside. Also means you're not trying to fry things to order right at the end. All right, these are lovely and golden. I'm gonna pull them out, put them on a tray with a rack for any excess oil to come off them. I'll fry these last 3, and then I reckon we can check our chicken. I reckon that's almost ready. So our chicken's cooked. We saw it said 65 in the thickest part. Carryover cooking is gonna take that well over 70 degrees. We're gonna pull this press off, put that in the sink. It'll be hot, don't touch it. And then we're gonna carefully take our chicken out and put it on a tray to rest. We wanna keep all this deliciousness to make our sauce. So just carefully lift it off the bottom of the tray. Let that do its thing and start making our sauce. We're gonna start by putting some heat underneath this pan. Get a wooden spoon, get any of all that fond off the bottom, make sure it's nice and loose, bring it up to temperature. And I've got 4 shallots sliced. I'm gonna add those to the pan. I want them sliced kind of thick too. I don't want these to disappear. I want a bit of texture in our finished sauce. We've got all the delicious olive oil that we cooked the chicken in, and all the amazing chicken fat that's come off that chicken, and all the fond which is going brown. Those shallots have starting to soften up. Add a couple of cloves of garlic. We don't want to burn the garlic, so just keep it moving. And I've got a bunch of grapes that I've cut in half. This is going to add a really lovely sweetness. It's also going to work really well with the endive. We've got a bit of white wine here. Deglaze the pan. We want that white wine to reduce completely away. So I've got another fry pan here, which we're going to use for our endive. Oh, actually, got some olive oil right here. It's all nice and hot. So we want a good amount of color on these endive. So let that oil get nice and hot. Now oil's hot, add our endive, cut side down. A little bit of pressure, get some good color on the underside of those, and we'll finish cooking those through, adding a little bit of chicken stock, and just let them steam through carefully. So our wine is almost completely reduced. You can see the sauce is starting to thicken. Be really careful at this point. You don't want this to evaporate to absolutely nothing. But now we add some chicken stock. Let's have a look at the underside of one of these. That's what we're looking for, great color. We're gonna leave those skins, that side, same side down. We're gonna turn the heat off. Add a little bit of chicken stock, maybe half a cup. Put a lid on it. That residual heat will just steam those nicely through. We want these cooked, but not like falling apart, mushy, gross. If they overcook these, they're no good. So the residual heat in that is more than enough to cook those through. Really got a great way with words sometimes, don't I? Mushy, gross. Okay, we're pretty close here, guys, as far as like, these are cooked, that's kind of cooking. So the great thing about cooking the chicken spatchcock is that it just takes a lot less time to cook, and you're able to do the other things, you know, in a much more timely manner. My Nana's roast, which is still in the oven and has been kind of this whole time, that took in total, including time in the pan, about 35 minutes to cook. My whole roast chicken has been going for well over an hour now, but we are almost ready. So let's pull that out, get the rest of the garnishes ready for that, and then we'll come back and plate up my modern chicken. 1950s roast chickens never look so good. So our potatoes are nice and cooked, crunchy on the outside, carrots are cooked through, got golden chicken. Let's see what we're at. I reckon we're at like 85. In my world, that's overcooked, but in my Nana's world, that's perfect. No offense, Nana, I love you. I'm gonna pull this lemon out. When you're removing a roast chicken like this, be really careful when you lift it up, because the cavity will be full of liquid, and these tongs have a tendency for the liquid to run down here and then run down your arm. If you do it, make sure the tongs are over a bench as well. Leave that to rest. I am going to take the carrots and potatoes off this tray as well, because I don't want them to go soggy. So they can go onto our serving dish. And then we've just got to make the peas, of course, and the gravy, if you could even call it that. No, I'm not dissing packet gravy, kind of am. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do packet gravy because I feel like it's the essence of this dish. This is how I had it growing up. But I'm not going to start with water. I'm going to start with stock because I can't not. So I'm going to pour some of that hot stock in the tray. Then I'm going to scrape all the fond off the bottom. You know, we can't waste that flavour, can we? I don't know when the last time was I used packet gravy. Now I'm going to pour that back in, and I'm going to pour it through a comically small sieve just to give myself a challenge. I'm like a mixologist. Get that water actually boiling for our peas. Now we just whisk in our insert brand name here, packet gravy. Why is it grey? Or purple even. Whisk that in. I reckon it needs more. It's still not thick enough. I don't reckon that's thick enough for our English audience. Now we're talking. Look at the consistency. It's like it's been thickened with xanthan gum or something. Trying to improve the recipe's probably made it worse. Tastes like packet gravy. It's not offensive. It's just not like amazing. The obligatory frozen peas that are held together by a rubber band. Wouldn't be any other way. These won't take long. 2 minutes max. You'd have way more peas than you actually think you need to. Just half of them end up on the floor. All right, I think it's time to carve our roast chicken. Carving a chicken is pretty easy. Leave it on the tray to start with. We know it's probably a little bit overcooked. We're gonna run our blade down either side of the leg. There's probably gonna be a whole lot of moisture in there. So if you leave it in the tray, we can save that moisture. If you do it on a board, that moisture will be lost. Pop that bone out. And then I like to cut the legs into half. You have the drumstick and the thigh. And then make sure there's no more liquid in there. Take the crayon off. You've done your job. Thank you, Trey. I'm gonna run our blade down either side of the sternum or the chest bone. Take that whole breast off. And we're gonna leave the wing intact, so the wing on the breast. Same on the other side. Yeah, this is where you find the really dry meat now. That thigh was at 65, well, what was it, 85, sorry. You can see this breast meat is just like really quite dry, which is why I think roast chicken often gets a bad name. So I'll cut the breast into 3 pieces, leaving the wing intact. Then we can put our legs down first, breast on after. We'll flip the bird over, and this is what I was talking about earlier, the spatchcock. This is what we call the oyster muscle. That's just for me. So our peas have cooked for 2 minutes now. Just gonna drain those. Peas back in the pot, because you can't have peas without a big knob of butter. Some salt, just toss that butter through until it coats all the peas. Notice the absence of herbs as well, which is kind of killing me on the inside, but I don't think there was that many herbs used in the Western world in the 50s. Maybe in the restaurants, but even still. Into a lovely period correct dish. gravy in our comically small gravy boat for how much gravy we've got. And there you go, our 1950s roast chicken, roast potatoes, roast carrots, peas and gravy. And we've got this lovely chicken carcass here to make a soup with tomorrow. So this would go into the pot or in the fridge overnight, into a pot tomorrow, some vegetables, pull all the meat off, chicken noodle soup. But let's get the modern one plated up. So for our modern chicken, everything's rested lovingly. You know, it's had a lot of time to chill out, relax, kind of get familiar with each other. So we're just gonna pop this back in the oven, make sure it's nice and hot. While that's in the oven, got some parsley here I'm gonna finely chop just to finish our sauce. Everyone always gets offended when I use curly parsley, but I feel like it's the forgotten herb and it's delicious. If you don't like curly parsley, you can use flat leaf. Have a look at our sauce. It's looking good, nice and light. Let's have a little taste, because I feel there's a little bit of salt and I need some acid. We're gonna use some red wine vinegar because of the sweetness from those shallots and from the grapes. Just want some acid to cut through that sweetness. You don't need much. Oh, yum. That's what we're looking for, really nice, quite chunky sauce. I don't want thick sauces, I'm kind of a little bit old school these days. We get lots of parsley in there, stir that through. Lovely, time to plate. We'll start with our endive, super simple, straight on the plate. All that lovely color on show. Get some of this cooking liquid over the top. And we just got some 18-month aged Parmesan over the top. Nice richness and creaminess. Little drizzle of olive oil. Potato pave, crispy on the outside, lovely and fluffy and light in the middle. Pretty decadent though, lots of butter, rich herbs. There we go. Finally, our spatchcock and dry brine chicken, which is even easier to carve than the whole one. And we can kind of just leave this on the bone. So legs off. So you can take this off the bone, especially if you got kids. If you're feeding the kids, I would take it off the bone. If you're feeding adults, I prefer to leave it on the bone. So we're gonna run our blade right down the center of the carcass, all the way through. And then cut that on the angle once. And then back through on the angle again, all the way through. And you're left with some really nice pieces. Just make sure you warn your guests that they are on the bone. And if you did want to take it off the bone, it's the same as before. Run your blade down that sternum bone, either side, our drumsticks, and finally, our delicious sauce. Just sweet, a little bit of acidity, some nice meatiness, and a little bit of fattiness too from the chicken fat. And there you go, my modern version of a roast chicken, potato pave, some braised endive, and a lovely spatchcock chicken with a shallot and grape sauce. So what one eats better? Let's find out. We'll start with the 1950s, lashings of gravy on there. Let's taste this chicken. It's nicely seasoned, well, it's seasoned, and it's a bit dry and a bit one-dimensional. But there's nothing wrong with that, trust me. I would give anything to have my nana cook me this meal. Potatoes are crispy and they're fluffy inside, nothing wrong with that at all. And a nicely roasted carrot. Let's jump over here. Got some grape, got some of the thigh meat. There's just a lot more going on. We've got great balance of flavor there. You know, the sauce is a lot lighter, which I really enjoy. It's got a really good balance of sweetness and sourness from the vinegar. Really yummy. Endive. It's got a really lovely bitterness in a really nice way. And then that Parmesan just brings it together with some nice richness. But honestly, what I've been waiting for was this thing. Look at it. It's crunchy, deliciously crispy on the outside, seasoned beautifully all the way through, and extremely rich and luxurious in the middle. That is one bougie potato.
What would your nana choose?
Well, honestly, Nana Herndon was pretty progressive for a woman of that era, but I think she'd go the modern one, mainly because she loves her grandson so much. But let me know, what one would you have, the modern or the old school? No wrong answers.